You are listening to the Mom to Mom podcast, hosted by Stephanie Sinclair, founder and owner of How to Mom. This podcast is meant to empower women and bring the community together through storytelling and education. During these episodes, you will hear stories of triumph, heartache, and hope. You will hear time-tested tips and tricks shared by mamas and women. You will hear a variety of birth stories that will resonate with all birthing families, advice from professionals who have dedicated their teachings to pregnancy, birth, and moms. Here, you will find encouragement, support, and community, because we are your community, and we are so happy to have you. Now, on to today's episode. Hello to our listeners. I'm so excited to have you guys on today listening to this episode of the Mom to Mom podcast. It is an interesting topic and something that is definitely related to parenthood. It might be a little bit different from our birth story episodes, but I would argue that it is just as important as any other episode we have recorded. I am so excited to introduce you to our guest, who is a professional here in the Twin Cities. I'm going to do just a little intro of Sarah Briner. And then we're going to kind of let her take the lead and share with you guys what it is that she does, where her passion lies, and why she loves to help moms and parents like myself. And I really feel like when you hang up from listening to this episode, you are not only going to have some really great education that you didn't have prior to listening or may not have had prior to listening, but also you may want to follow up and ask some additional questions because this topic is very important. So welcome to the Mom to Mom podcast, Sarah Briner. And Sarah actually founded The Legal Mama, which, by the way, I love the name. She knows that. The Legal Mama is the only women-owned and operated concierge boutique estate planning firm here in Minnesota. They pride themselves on their life and legacy planning, a holistic view of you, always considering your time, your energy, and your true desires for your family, friends, and community. They are committed to keeping your planning on track and ensure every family gets as much additional support as they need. As adults, and especially as parents, we all need a little momming in our lives sometimes. And the Legal Mama does just that. They give us the opportunity to feel good about our estate planning options and push us that little extra bit to just get it done properly. And we are so excited to dive in a little bit deeper. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me. I can absolutely geek out on this all the time. I love talking about it. I love educating about it. Yes, it's a little bit difficult to think about and talk about as parents, but I'm just super excited to be here. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And it is so important. And thank goodness for people like you who can talk about this all day and are in a position to help educate our community so that parents aren't in a really difficult spot. Because yes, like you said, it's not the easiest conversation to have, but it's so necessary. And I think we all can think about a family throughout our lifetime that was in a really bad spot and it was really hard to navigate through. And I just know as a parent myself, I don't want that to be our scenario. And so that's why today and estate planning is so important. So Sarah, if you can kind of take us back, let us know your story, how you got here and where your passion lies and how did you find your passion in helping parents feel good about their planning?
Yeah. And I mean, the short answer is I became a mom, right? So my priorities, my outlook on everything changed and my outlook on career changed. I still wanted to work in the legal field, but certainly didn't want to be stuck in the environment that I was in. So I'm going on my 22nd year of practice and Legal Mama has officially been open going on 12 years, but I did it on the side for a little while. So I was previously a managing partner at a pretty large firm in the Atlanta metro area. And I had my first child, went right back to work at 6 weeks, and that kind of thing. Pumping in a closet and all the fun things that we do returning to work. And when it came time, I was about 5 months pregnant with my second, and I just said, I can't do this anymore this way. I am not helping families in the way that I want to, and I'm not really furthering any education, conversation, or benefit really to the greater good. And so where I was, or how things played out for me in my partnership track, is that I was a non-voting partner. And what that means in a firm is that you sit in those meetings, you're responsible for a department of associate attorneys, you're responsible for their billable hours and all of that. But I would sit there kind of, you see behind the curtain, but you don't get any say in it. And I really got to a point where I was just so frustrated with sitting there and watching the historically standard process of law, and going through reports and saying, yes, I'm making sure my associates round up to the quarter hour. They're not stopping their clock when they go to the bathroom. And that doesn't do anything for the client. And I just didn't want to do it anymore. So I launched Legal Mama officially when I was pregnant with my second, and my kids are now 9 and 12. So we're not in the babyhood stage anymore, but it definitely, we're still right in it. And all the things that go along with that, the concerns and stresses we have as parents, especially as moms, when we're doing the majority of that emotional labor and intellectual labor of worrying about all the things and checking all the boxes every day. One, I wanted to be able to be present with my kids, but I also wanted to do something that I was passionate about. And as I was learning about different things in estate planning, like coming up in my career, I would routinely say, how is this okay? Like, how is this the way we do things in this practice? How is this not malpractice? And the answer you always get from those senior partners and the people that have been around, all the time is, this is just how it's done. This is what we do. Where I'm thinking this should be malpractice. Nope, that's standard practice. And so I wanted to change that and provide an option for parents specifically, but just families in general, to say, we're not going to do the standard practice that doesn't really support families, certainly doesn't support families with minor children or school-age children or babies. Right. And how can we disrupt that? How can we change what is accepted as standard when that isn't serving anyone but the bottom dollar of those big firms? And when you're billed out at $500 an hour, whether you like it or not, when you have clients that have to go either follow instructions that you've given them, go to the bank, do whatever it is you're asking them to do, they're going to have questions along the way. Right. But when it comes to asking those questions, one of the spouses or parents is going to say, well, don't call Sarah, because that's going to be a $90 or $120 bill in the mail for a 5-minute question. And so really my passion came out of that frustration of, one, feeling underserved in the community generally, and also wanting to disrupt what is accepted as standard without providing any ongoing support or value, or really even just clarity to our clients. So that is how it started.
I love that. And it kind of sounds like your passion to me was twofold, right? It was for sure because you had this passion for parents and helping them plan, but also to not just continue along with what was considered standard practice. And I commend you for that, because it takes a lot of courage to kind of, go against that, but it's needed. And people like you are so needed. A couple of things also that came to mind is when you think back to that time, I can only imagine not very many parents with school age children or with babies, we're actually sitting down with an attorney and doing estate planning, which is like you
Right.
said, is so backwards because really that's when the foundation of the work should, well, possibly even before then, but for sure the foundation for those children should be done then. I can just imagine who your clientele was. It definitely was my parents. And so
Right.
I think that is so important. And it was something that, you know, not only becoming a mom changed that for my mindset of like, okay, what happens if something happens to Brian and I? But also, unfortunately, I had a tragic family event happen when my oldest was only 6 months old, and I lost two of my cousins who were young dads.
Mm,
And these wives and moms were left without a spouse, with young, very, very young children, some children that were even unborn at the time. And nothing, no planning because we
mhm.
were young and people weren't having these conversations. And even if they were having these conversations, sometimes it's like, looked the other way because it's like, oh, I don't want to go there. And it is really hard. I remember sitting down with Brian and doing some of this planning with him. And yeah, it wasn't easy to say, like when we were doing our healthcare directives, like if you were in this situation, how would you want me, to serve you as your wife? Like what decisions do you want me to make? Because they're going to be
Exactly.
different for both of us. And I want to be able to honor him, not only, for his sake, but also for his children's. And so they can be hard conversations. However, they're so worth it because it was just this peace of mind to know that, like, okay, this work is done. These conversations happened. Now we can go on living. But if for some reason something tragic happened, I can really focus on being with the kids, knowing that the planning is already done, or vice versa.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big piece that's missed because just as you're saying, we don't think about it when we're young. We're like, we have time to plan for that. And all of the marketing and information you see out there is really targeted towards retirement.
Mhm.
And if you read that information or you research, what do I need? What do I need to be thinking about if you're willing to go there? A lot of that is really focused around people with wealth as well. And so a lot of the things that we are asked routinely are one, do we have enough things or enough money to do planning? Does it make sense? And our initial response is absolutely, because the biggest concern is not the money. Yes, you are working to grow, wealth or security for yourselves as you age and also your kids. But the most important piece of that is the guardianship and the emergency planning. And even when we do see families go and engage an attorney or a firm to do planning for them when their kids are young, a lot of the biggest piece of that gets missed because, for example, where we name our permanent guardians, if both parents are gone, or if you're a single parent, if you're gone, where we name those guardians is in your will document. Your will is only triggered and in effect if you have died. So the question then becomes, and where we see this huge gap in planning is, what happens if there's a temporary emergency? What happens if we're in the car together and God forbid we're in a car accident and maybe you have kids in their car seats or boosters, so they're secure, they're okay in the back. Maybe you will be okay in the long term, right? But maybe you need to go to the hospital, or
Right.
you are not able to speak or not responsive in that moment. You can't guide those first responders what to do.
Right.
And what we know is that under the law, that if you do not have documentation in place, that Child Protective Services is going to get involved, right? Because first responders don't know who else to call.
Right.
We can't get into locked smartphones anymore. We can't see who the in case of emergency contact is. And even if that is a spouse or a family member, that doesn't mean they have legal authority to authorize medical care for your kids or stay with them overnight.
Exactly.
Or let's say you have the luxury or your kids are old enough where you feel comfortable to travel without them. What happens if you get stuck where you are for a medical emergency or whatever the case may be? You may need someone to travel with your kids across state lines or internationally, and that has to be documented legally, and that is not part of the traditional process. So things like that are really where families with minor kids are underserved and
Yeah.
frankly ignored in the process, right? So,
And there's
and most
so
people think,
many scenarios. And when we're in those situations, obviously that's the last thing we have the capacity to think about or should be
right,
thinking about. But also, these conversations not only happen with your attorney and with your spouse, but also with those guardians who you're naming. And so everybody, that open communication is there, and so everybody can really pull together and act, versus, and it's like our day-to-day life, right, as moms and as parents, like,
right.
we always are wanting to do the best and put our kids in the best situation as possible, and we need to make sure that that's happening even when we don't have the capacity to act on that. And so that is so important.
Absolutely.
There's so many scenarios where these documents and the law play a role, and we need people like you to guide us parents to say, like, this is a real scenario and a situation that could take place. So what do we do in that situation? And so the next part I want to get into, because what is so important, and what I loved about the first time we met in the conversation is, like, nothing was off the table, right? Like, we just had a transparent conversation, and I felt like I could be open in saying that, yes, I agree, all of this is important, and yes, I believe that every family needs to be served in this capacity. But a lot of families hesitate because they're like, I can't afford that. And how unfortunate that we have so many families that don't have planning in place because of finances. And so you've
Or
done
think
something,
they don't need it because of finances,
or
right?
think they don't need it. Yes. And so
Absolutely.
you've done something so special at the Legal Mama. And so if you could talk a little bit about the specific services and how you have made these services more accessible to the average everyday family and not just the wealthy. Okay, you guys, we're going to take just a brief break so I can tell you all about an amazing company, Body Ready Method. Body Ready Method is an amazing company that offers pregnancy and postpartum programs. I urge you to take a look at this, especially if you are wanting to stay active during your pregnancy and prepare for labor and delivery. This is also a great program to help heal and recover your body post-birth. You can go to howtomom.com/links and follow the Body Ready Method link from there. Okay, back to today's episode.
Yes. And thank you, because I do think that is such a crucial part of the puzzle. And it doesn't matter what your level of wealth or cash flow or anything is, dipping into day-to-day budget, right? When you're worried about daycare, and does it make sense to have both parents working when you have multiple kids in daycare because of the
Right.
trade-off, and just all the little things like living life. And so certainly we recognize that more than anyone. And we also recognize that it is a big process, right? There is a lot that goes into it, and it does have that cost associated with it. So when we look at the market trends, and we say, okay, here is what the general average cost of doing planning is, that's fine, right? That's what it's going to be. The market speaks to that.
Right.
But what we don't take into consideration as a whole in the legal community, I should say, that I really wanted to do differently when I opened this practice, was to make it accessible, like you're saying. So yes, it may be more than someone thinks they need to spend, or they don't know what to expect. But what we do is not only offer payment plans, we don't charge any fees or interest for those things. We just make it as doable as possible under the things that we have to accomplish and what goes into that. And then secondly, one, we always charge flat fees for everything. And I have a lot of literature and information on our website that's like free materials, free education, because as I've said a million times and will continue to say my entire life, that education is so important. But just things like, what should you ask an attorney when you're trying to hire someone? It's an interesting industry in the sense that we don't really know what the qualifications of doing certain types of law practice or certain areas, or what that should look like, other than what do you charge? So one, what do you ask to know that you can even compare apples to apples? Because estate planning in the realm of law is one of those things where there isn't cut and dry directive or rules of exactly how it has to look or how it has to go, as long as you're capturing the things that you have to do under the law. So there's a lot more room for differences and maneuverability in how you practice under the law when it comes to estate planning versus something like criminal law, right? Where it's like, this is the law, these are the statutes. You've either done that thing or you haven't, or, that kind of thing. But estate planning is very different. And so I want people to have the tools to really be able to compare apples to apples. So there may be, there are other attorneys out there that do flat fee billing as well. And so when I talk to a family, I say, okay, here are the things, one, that we're going to talk about together before we even decide what that budget or fee is going to look like. So we have designed different tiers of planning. But the important thing about that is that if you're in, let's say, a tier 1 plan versus a tier 3 plan, you're not getting less things or less support. You're still getting every single legal document available to you under the law in estate planning, even the things that are not standard or traditional, like I was talking about. So we have something that we've designed called the Guardian Guide that covers all those gaps that I was talking about. Temporary emergency, if you're planning to travel without your kids, those kind of things. But also making sure that when the documents are complete and signed, that is not the end of the process or the end of the support you get, because this is where we see it fall off the radar, right? You're like, okay, I didn't want to think about this to begin with. I've gone ahead and gone through the process, and now we've signed the documents. I'm going to put it on the shelf, and I do not want to think about this anymore, right? Like because we don't want to think about it. But if we actually change the dialogue and turn that around and say, this is something that feels good to think about. It feels good to know that not only have you done it once, but how is that going to apply if your kids are 5 and 7? How is that going to apply when they're 15 and 17, right? Exactly. And it needs to continue to work for you. You may live in a different state. You may have additional children. You may have changed jobs and have different benefits. All of those things play a role and are also a very easy window to lose control of that process and get to a place where, like you're talking about, you had family that you tragically lost so young and early in life. And yes, maybe they hadn't done, their wills or the standard planning, but even if they had done that and it was 5, 10, 30 years later, would it have mattered anyway? And a lot of times the answer is no. And the thing I hate more than anything when it comes to planning is meeting with a client who has lost someone and they know they have done planning. So they bring that to us and they find out that none of the things are either current or covered under the law or are protected, and they're still going to go through a lengthy process. And the thing that you said that really kind of hit the nail on the head was you want to be able to have that conversation with your family, the people you're asking to play a part in those roles, whether it's guardian, whether it's what we refer to as the executor, the person executing that plan for you, or more importantly, when you have minor children, your trustee, the person that is going to be responsible for the long term of managing those assets. It doesn't matter if the only thing you have in the bank is a checking account with $300 and your life insurance through work and a 401k that's got $2,500 in it. It does not matter, because if that is protected properly and managed properly, that can grow into something significant for your children by the time they are your age or whatever that looks like. But the key thing there is we really focus not only on the process of getting the plan in place, but what that support looks like long term. And I always say this, that if you think one of the things that really made me most excited about opening this practice and going into this area of law in this way is that if you think about like 1800s, 1900s, like old times, right? Yeah. you would have a community or family doctor that would come to your home that knew every child that was born, knew them their whole lives.
Yes.
When the parents got to an elderly age or passed, they were there, they supported the family, and they knew that family and their needs and their wishes and all of the things. At that same time and place in history, attorneys were referred to as counselors of law. But we don't utilize that as a method or strategy anymore. We aren't counseling our clients the way that they deserve to be counseled. And so what I wanted to do is bring that back. I wanted to have that sense of community. I wanted to have that sense of security and support for my clients. So when you come in now, your kids are young, you're setting up these things in place. It's not good enough for me as your counselor at law to turn over those documents to you and say, here you go. I hope you have a wonderful long life. That is insufficient and frankly a disservice to everyone. And so what we like to do is to say, we are here as your counselor for the life of you, and hopefully when your kids or your surviving spouse or family need it, and when those people you are asking that huge ask of doing that thing for you, whether it's a guardian or whether it's a trustee, they need guidance too. And to leave them on their own is also really unfair and stressful to them. And so what I would see play out over and over again in my previous law life was, you get to that point and they're confused. They're going through that trauma, that stress, that chaos of the loss of that person. And now the family is saying, okay, well, I know I'm the person in charge of this now, but I don't know what I'm even supposed to do first. How do I get access to their money? How do I even know who to call or how I'm going to pay for that until I can have that help to figure out what I need to do? And so all of our plans, not only are they flat fee, but they are built to last and to provide that support for the long run. We do a 3-year review and check-in with every single client. They do not pay for that. We also build in what we call post-death administration support. If you are naming someone to be an executor or trustee that has to go through that job of figuring those things out and taking action, that is legal action. And that can be very stressful for someone that either has never been involved in the law or legal process or court. Most people don't realize that this involves court. It involves a court process unless you have a trust set up properly. And whether based on, budget or any of the choices, we're going through a will process that does include court, or we've set up a trust to essentially do these things ahead of time, they still need support. So every family is able to go to that person or people that they're asking to do that job. And a lot of people feel guilty about it, right? Like as a parent, you're like either asking a sibling or a friend or whatever that is, listen, if something happens to me, I'm asking you to take on the responsibility of my kids for the long term, or I need you to be able to manage my entire trust estate, whatever that looks like, on top of your own until my kids are 30 or 40 or whatever that looks like. And you may say, whoa, like 30, 40, that sounds crazy. There are a lot of reasons behind that. I want to know. I could go into a whole thing on that, right? But the idea is that most people don't realize when they're asking someone to be in that role for them, that what they're actually saying is, if something happens to me, I am obligating you to a 3+ year legal litigated process. Thanks so much. I really appreciate volunteering for that, right? That's not what we want to do for anybody. We really want to be able to say, I want you to do this thing for me because you are the person I trust the most in the world with my kids or the finances or both. But I have done everything I possibly can to set this up in a way that it is not going to burden you and it's going to be an easy transition and process considering what we're talking about. And so that is really, and you can see I get really amped up, right? Because I get very passionate and emotional about it because it is really the key to everything. And so
I'm sure seen it time
Yeah,
and time
we've
again.
seen all the things.
And I think
Right.
what you've made really clear, and even to somebody like myself, who I felt like I've been through part of the process, what you've
Mhm.
made so crystal clear is the longevity of the service that you provide. Because how frustrating, like you said, for somebody to feel like they've put in the effort, they've put in the work, they've put in the investment, and
Absolutely.
it still be stressful. And that is exactly the purpose of the planning, is to create less stress so that the family is able to really focus on what's most important during those times and not the legalities and the logistics. And so
Exactly.
I think the commitment that you have to families is so needed and so important. And like you said, I mean, really missing in the field, because that is a true service of family planning, is not just kind of the front end and then say, okay, hopefully you'll never have to use this, and then and if you do, it's going to be a headache and such. But I have so many questions kind of swirling in my brain, because this stuff is it's so important. And unless you take the time to really, talk about it or to listen to today's podcast, we often, maybe it comes up in our brain every now and again and we kind of push it aside. But more times than not, families are not thinking about it, or they don't, or it's too overwhelming for them. So I think how I kind of
Absolutely
relate
can't.
this a little bit to the birth world is it's twofold. So just like anything in parenthood, it can feel very overwhelming, right? And so to have counsel, to have somebody who is in a similar situation, meaning also a parent, have had to make decisions and have these conversations, that is really comforting to other parents, to say, what would you do in this situation? Oftentimes we'll say that to our pediatrician is, what did you do with your kids? Do you
Right.
get that like personal touch of a service that you're providing, and it doesn't feel so impersonal? But then I think another thing, when I think about birth, and what we really talk with our clients a lot about, and why education is so important, and just what you do is just, I'm so glad you're on today, is who do we want speaking for us when we are not able to speak for ourselves?
Exactly. And no
Oh,
one's going to be us, right? No one is ever going to be us for our kids.
no, but better
But
my sister-in-law than
right,
CPS, and I just
right.
like, to me, I'm just like, I'm fired up now, because it's so important having babies, no matter what age they are, they're my babies. And just like when we prepare for our birth, we are vulnerable. We are in a state that maybe we're emotionally driven, and or we're not able to make decisions for ourselves. Well, it's not very far from the situation we're talking about today, that if we are in a situation, whether it be an accident, death, travel, and we're not able to get back to our kids, who do we want speaking on our behalf?
Absolutely. And anything you choose, like, so, we get the question a lot too of, okay, well, we know we have a person, but what if they're not able to do it? And
Right.
we don't know who else, there's nobody that's really great as a backup. And my answer to that is anyone you choose that's less than ideal is still going to be
Yeah.
better than some judge who's never met you, doesn't know your personal preferences, ideals, all of
Yeah.
those things. They're going on what's on paper. And I can tell you all the stories of the things that we've seen over time
Yeah.
of completely logical choices being completely ignored because that's just not what that particular judge or their bias thinks
Yeah.
is the right choice for someone. And someone can look great on paper and be a complete disaster in their life, right? Or
Right.
vice versa.
Right.
And so yes, this is your choices are always going to be better, and no one's ever going to be us. It's the hardest thing. But as you're talking about, when you're starting to plan for your birth, prenatally, and you're getting set up with your doula. And the
Mhm.
purpose of that is to have that not only ongoing support in
Mhm.
the actual labor process, but
Mhm.
to know that someone is there advocating for you, someone is there to clarify questions because, in my own personal experience, I'm in the midst of, basically transition, and I hear the nurses start to talk about something on the monitor, and I've done all my reading and all my education, right? And it's not my first birth. And I'm still turning to my doula and saying, give me the exact information I need to make a decision and guide me, right?
And she knows you and how you take in information.
And also they know your birth plan. They know your desires are not always what the hospital guidelines are, right?
Exactly.
It's the exact same in this situation.
Very much
And
so.
we meet you where you are. Whatever you're comfortable with talking about, or where you're really stressed or scared about talking about things, when you're setting up a birth plan is the perfect time to start doing your planning in estate planning as well, because it all does go together. We do talk about those healthcare questions like you were talking about. And as stressful as it is, we have to think about it in our birth as well of, what do we do if something happens and there's an emergency that we're trying to prepare and plan against, but things happen in life. And so getting that all out of the way at the same time, where you're already in the mindset of thinking about what your choices are, does make it easier in some ways to just go ahead and get it out of the way. And then you can go into that birth and labor process feeling relieved and secure, and not have to think about those things because you've already
have this thing kind of,
And if you're someone who doesn't want to talk about it when it comes to the estate planning, you don't want to sit through a planning session where we talk about all those different choices and do you want to structure it this way or that way? And as you were saying, you want that feedback of, well, what did you do for your kids?
Right.
So we actually set up a process. We call it Sarah's plan. This is what I've done for my kids. So if you say, I don't want to have to think about it, I don't want to have to make all these decisions, I want what you put in place for your kids, because I trust that's obviously mine's the most protective, right?
I was going to say
the most secure, it's the most protective. It avoids the most things, and it protects us from things like taxes and all those things that we have in Minnesota that are specific to us. We like to be unique here, and different from everywhere else in the country, and estate planning is no different.
Hey guys, it's Stephanie Sinclair, founder and owner of How to Mom. I'm just interrupting today's episode to make sure you are well aware of all that How to Mom offers. We, of course, are a community and a support group for all moms at all stages of life, but we also offer a large variety of services that I wanted to make sure you are well aware of. We offer birth doula services, both in person or online support. We have birth support groups with different birth packages to choose from. We also provide placenta encapsulation services, lactation services from our lactation counselors. We also offer postpartum services, birth planning assistance, belly casting. We have a registered dietitian, nutritionist. We also offer a variety of photography services from birth, newborn, and family packages. We truly have it all here at How to Mom. So please don't hesitate to reach out today to have a free consult and help us find the best way to support you in your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journey. Now back to today's episode.
And so we have that as an option if it just feels too much to go through the entire process, then let's do that and put that in place, and it's going to be okay. I can't choose your people for you. But that's really the only thing you have to decide in that. But also the entire style, vibe, dynamic, everything of Legal Mama, down to the name and the brand of this is not a stuffy traditional law practice, right? This is not only a boutique environment and firm, but it is also an environment that we have built in the office itself, that when you come in, you do not feel like you're in a law office. You feel like you're at home. And so it does not have, no one's in a suit here. We don't have, old law books on a bookshelf because nobody uses those anyway in the digital. We don't need those things, right? What we're here for is to bring you into a comfortable environment where we can talk naturally like this and really talk parent to parent and say, okay, here are the things that I look at from the law that are my biggest concerns for parents in your situation. And also the things that I think about as a parent and how do we merge those together? But also really tackling the process from saying, here are all the different options available to you. Here's what the budgets look like for each of those things. And here is how your particular family dynamic, amount of wealth or not wealth, or, family, children choices, your values, your insights, all the things that you want to pass on to your kids, those human pieces that are completely ignored, especially for families with young children. The hardest thing I have to say in any planning session is things like documenting your own opinions and wishes for your kids, for the people you're putting in place as a guardian or a trustee, making videos or audio, but I love video because the hardest thing to think about as a parent, especially when your kids are small, is that if they lose you, the first thing to fade from memory is your voice, your mannerisms, your persona. And that is the hardest part of planning, is getting that documented and secured, right? But no matter how we go about doing those things, and we have a lot of different ways we support in that, the key is making sure that those wishes are met and that you're not being popped into a formatted plan that it's like, okay, well, you check the box of having minor children. Right. Yes, you own your home. Yes, you have more than $75,000 in assets all together with your life insurance and everything. And that puts you in this category. Right. That may or may not meet any of your needs, right? That may not accomplish any of the goals or the things you're actually concerned about. And so that's the key, is not only bringing you into an environment where you feel safe and secure and comfortable to share with us things about your family dynamic or your concerns or wishes, but also to know that that's being heard and that that's being put into the design of your plan. And you can choose what budget you want to put around that and things like that. So that's how we tackle it, to make sure that, one, you feel good that you understand what you're putting in place and what it doesn't do.
So important.
You have more choice and control and power in that process. We even look at life insurance, retirement accounts. We look at how your beneficiaries are designated to make sure those things are done correctly. But a lot of the information, even around things like life insurance or financial advising, we're not financial advisors. That is not our wheelhouse. Right. But we do have a branch of Legal Mama that's Legal Mama Life that is specifically for life insurance, where we can talk about it to meet your goals or meet you where your budget is. This is not about selling a product and making a commission. We don't offer these services to the general public if you're not doing estate planning with us. But it is a way to look at strategy for things like protecting from the financial perspective and how we put that into your plan. And you don't have to go to another appointment at another office and fill out more paperwork.
It kind of completes
were to happen where you need to actually claim or cash in that policy, we're here, we're supporting you anyway. We can go do that. And it's all just kind of in the realm of that ongoing support that you have. But we look at it in a different way, right? We're not going to say, well, they say you need to have 10 times your salary and be able to pay off your house. That is not the strategy we're going to advise. If you have small kids, there's a lot better ways that we're going to use that money. And you said something that really was a good point of, we want to make sure you have the freedom, if you've lost a spouse or going through that trauma, to take a breath, to not have to go right back to work, right? So we're looking at it from that perspective of, if I, as a parent and as a spouse, lost my other half, that co-parent and partner in this whole life game, how am I going to get anywhere I want to go? A lot of people want to be able to reevaluate career or where they're living. They don't want to say, well, I've got to go right back to work. There are a lot of strategies we can use from the life insurance perspective to secure that plan, that even if you feel worried about how much money you have in the bank or what you're leaving for your kids, there are some really creative, dynamic ways we can use life insurance to do that too. So we're looking at all those different perspectives to make sure that you're really secure, but also it's always coming back to that foundation of education, that you feel comfortable to make those decisions for yourself, that you're not coming into a law office where you're going to be judged, right? You're going to be judged for not knowing about that thing or not knowing what to do, or feeling like you even have a family structure or dynamic that people are going to judge you about. This is a safe, open space, and it's meant to be casual in that way, to feel comfortable, to have those conversations so that we can support you in the right way. And I think that's really when it comes down to it, more important than any of the documents themselves, right? Because we want to know that our lawyer gets us and is going to create the thing we actually need.
Real family planning.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, I think there's so many reasons what sets the Legal Mama apart, but I want to make sure, and I think a lot of our listeners will already feel this just with listening today, but Sarah, you are so easy to talk to, and definitely come across as somebody who is a safe place to be able to actually bring real life concerns to feel like we can ask questions without feeling like, oh, is this a dumb question? Like, just a really welcoming environment with somebody who is really easy to talk to. I think that's going to be key. I could sit and talk with you all day and ask you so many questions, but I know you are a busy mama, much like all of our listeners today. And so we wanted to just give some good information, some valuable content to you all today who are listening, of just really truly how important this is and why people like Sarah have such a strong passion. And even myself, not being an attorney, but being a mom who's gone through some estate planning, why this was an episode today, because this is really, really, really important. And so for those listening to our episode today, Sarah, what would be the best next step of getting in touch with you? We will, of course, have all ways that they can reach out and follow you on Instagram and your website in our show notes. But if a mama is listening today, or a dad, and they're like, okay, I think I want to take the next step and at least asking some questions to see if this would be the right fit for me, how would you suggest them going about that? And then, hey, if you guys have any follow-up questions, I haven't asked yet, but I'm sure Sarah maybe would be willing down the road. We could do another episode that dives a little bit deeper into some specific areas. But I think today we really got a lot of information to our listeners, Sarah. So I appreciate that. But what would be the first step that you would advise our listeners to take after listening today?
So the easiest, best next step is go to thelegalmama.com. There is a banner at the top that says schedule online and schedule a 20-minute consult. There is no charge for that. We will give you that link to put on the show notes as well. Awesome. And by listening to this episode, exactly, you're taking that first step, right? Mm-hmm. You are educating yourself. You're just getting that window into the process. But by doing so, you're making that effort to educate yourself. And in furtherance of that, what I love to do then is say, let's share even more education if you're open to it. Yes. Anyone that would like to plan or go through a planning session, we refer to that as a family wealth planning session, but we really mean not only financial wealth, but all the other wealth of knowledge, information, and legacy we were talking about. Mm-hmm. We will waive the session fee for that for the podcast listeners, and that will be a private link that you can put in the show notes. That way you can go through the 2-hour process and see what that really means for you and designing that plan and get that information. And there's also, once you go to the website, there is a tab at the top that says freebies. And there are a number of things that you can take action on, download to learn more things. We're at the end of the year. The best things I recommend are, one, there is a sample asset tracker and a tax planner and a yearly goal planner on the website for free to download, because if you're a mama like me, I love nothing more than my checklists and my bullet journals.
Heck yeah.
My printable, downloads of like planner stuff.
Yes.
And as we're going into tax season, those are great things to do. But also you'll see on there is a link. It takes time to do planning.
Yeah.
And while you're going through the process of figuring that out, whether it's with us or anyone else, the most important thing of all of that is to make sure you've named that guardian for your children, because there is a process by law of the way the money will flow. There is not a process by law of where your kids will go.
Right.
And as we said, it's not going to be likely your choice. There is a place on that freebies page where you can click the button. It says kids protection planning, and you can name a permanent guardian for free, and it will email me letting me know that you've done that. And I am happy to look over the document. You can even stop in our Minnetonka office and I will notarize it for you.
Amazing.
So that is an action item that everybody can do today. It is super simple. It takes 10 minutes. And you can have that legal document in place while you're getting on the books for a planning session and all of those things. So those are the two key things.
Incredible.
1, schedule a consult.
Yes.
2, name a permanent guardian for your children. None of that will cost $1. And if you would like to move forward with any kind of educational session or planning session, you will be able to do that at no charge through the private link.
Amazing.
You are welcome to share that with friends and family, but we don't put it on the website because it's not free for everyone.
Yes. No, Sarah, you are a wealth of knowledge, and just with those resources right there and just the way that you are giving that information, and it just goes to show how much you really truly care about other moms and other families. And I can't thank you enough, not only for the exclusive offer, but just for being here today and educating our community. And I am just so excited to not only continue to partner and help spread the word, but also to learn from all of our listeners today who are taking you up on that offer, because lots of them are previous clients of mine who I know have littles at home, and I know will really value and appreciate just all that you have to offer. So thanks for being here today, Sarah. We are so excited to continue to pick your brain. Thanks for listening today, you guys. And all of our show notes will be below with all of Sarah's contact information and links that she referred to. And I know that you all are joining me again in saying thank you, Sarah.
Have a wonderful rest of the year. Thank you.
All right, you guys, that is it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed. If so, please subscribe to our podcast, comment, share, give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen, and we will see you next time.